Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dak Xavier Josiah, the host of A.C.M.G. Presents Talk Time Live, the podcast. You want to catch up with all of our podcast shows and hear from some of the hottest names in all of anime, comics, movies, and games, such as...
This is Miley Flanagan, the voice of Naruto.
This is Stephanie Shea, the voice of Sailor Moon.
This is Ruben Langan, voice of Ken Masters and Dante from Devil May Cry.
Hey there, this is Kyle Hebert, the voice of Ryu from Street Fighter V.
This is Chris Battle, character designer of Teen Titans Go.
Here's your chance to check out all of that and more on TalkTimeLive.com. TalkTimeLive.com provides all of our ACMG content with new and previous episodes, exclusive interviews, articles, and much more. Visit TalkTimeLive.com and let us help you learn to let go, live life, and love all things ACMG.
Talk Time Live.
Hey there, this is Kyle Hebert, the voice of Ryu from Street Fighter V. Rise up. The answer lies in the heart of battle. You're listening to ACMG Presents Talk Time Live. Hadouken!
It's time for your Talk Time Live exclusive.
You are now about to witness the strength of geek knowledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, folks, if you're a wrestling fan, then this episode is dedicated indefinitely for you. On the show with me right now is the co-host of the APTER Chat. Yes, if you're a hardcore wrestling fan, you know the name APTER very well. And this person co-hosts a podcast called the APTER Chat, which is also included with the legendary, now Wrestling Observer Hall of Famer, wrestling journalist Bill Apter of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. His name is Josh Shernoff, and he is here to talk about not only the podcast but also a new show coming to Fight TV, which is called So Says Shernoff, coming very soon. So we're going to talk wrestling, we're going to talk everything, even a little bit of video game talk. So Josh, welcome to Talk Time Live. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Funny story, people. I was actually on the hunt looking for some other guests also, and somehow, some way, you did a Facebook blast of your show.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, I thought it was the same thing, and I sent you out, saying, come on to the show. I would love to have you. And lo and behold, it wasn't the person I was looking for, but it was also the person that I wanted and needed at the end of the day. So it is worked out because, you are doing wrestling related stuff. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I normally don't do wrestling podcast on here unless it's somebody in relation to what we do. So we are going to make it connect. But
absolutely.
Even more so, you're with one of the icons of pro wrestling history. And that to me would warrant enough for me to want to talk to you anyway. So Josh, I gotta ask, before we even talk about your new show, how did you and Bill actually get together to do that podcast?
So I've known Bill since I was about 9 years old. He moved into my neighborhood, and so his daughter and my sister are the same age. They're in the same grade and been friends for years. I actually just saw her a couple weeks ago at my sister's wedding. So I've known Bill my entire life, and was basically there day one when he moved into the neighborhood with 1,000 wrestling related questions. And I can remember watching WrestleMania 12 over at his house, my brother, and so, for years and years, Bill was always just kind of this connection. And when I got into the business, because I wrestled for about 10 years, and when I first got into it, Bill was the one who connected me with Off of the Wild Samoan, who I trained with originally. Wow. And when I ended up down in OVW, he kind of had like a soft introduction for me and Al Snow, who I got to know down there pretty well. And so Bill kind of always throughout my life and throughout my wrestling career, was always instrumental in making these connections, presenting these opportunities for me. Yeah. So,
that's awesome.
That's
beyond awesome.
So as far as the podcast, Bill had been doing, I hadn't seen Bill in a couple of years. We were always still in touch, but I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I had recently moved back to the area, and Bill had been doing this weekly like a YouTube video where he would just kind of pop on for an hour on a Thursday night and just talk about whatever. Sometimes he had some guests call in, and he was just doing that, as he put it, just kind of, to keep his face out there, just stay relevant, And one time, I bumped into him, and he asked me to to come down. He's like, oh, next Thursday, come down and do the show with me. And I didn't know what to expect of that. So I went and we had a blast, and he invited me back the next week, and had fun again. And I just kind of kept thinking about, he had a podcast before that wasn't really very successful, because I just felt the guy who was doing it, and nothing against him, but I didn't think that he knew how to steer Bill in the right direction for a podcast. Because obviously a podcast is a relatively newer thing that Bill's not as yeah, and I mean, that's my nice way of calling him old, but it's but so I was kind of like, so I said to Bill, I said, would you have any interest in doing a podcast? Because the video thing's kind of taxing. It's a lot easier with a podcast. I'll be so much.
I used to do video myself, and I may actually go back eventually, but doing, being able to put a podcast together and then just pushing it out and publishing it, so much easier.
Yeah. And I mean, and just look at this, we're over the phone here talking to each other. And if this was supposed to be, imagine I'm your co-host and you need me there every single, every single week for an episode. So it started to become a little tiresome. So I said, I think a podcast could be really cool. And we had some conversations about, okay, what would that look like? And could we get sponsorship? And I said, if I can get sponsors and I can create the format and I can do all this, will you be a part of it? And he said, yeah, I'll do it. So we set it all up. And he said to me, who do you think would be a good first guest? So I kind of just off the top of my head, I'm like, Hulk Hogan be a good one, and lo and behold, Bill, takes out his phone, calls Hulk Hogan, who was more than happy to be doing a kind of I don't want to call it an apology tour, but
it was just one of the stops.
Yeah, so and to get him on there, and but yeah, so we started off with Hogan, and we ended up, then we had Sting and Rey Mysterio and Taz and all these names, and so yeah, I mean, that's really just how it kind of came together, and it went from, well, I'll kind of organize everything, to now Bill's very, we talk every day about, what can we do to make this show better, that show better. And, and that just opened up so many opportunities for me doing the podcast with Bill, which we've been doing for, I want to say 24 weeks now. So it's still relatively new, but
even still, I was going to pick up steam because of his name and brand alone.
Yeah. And it definitely has presented an opportunity for me to kind of branch out and do some other things that prior to working with Bill, I didn't really have. Not that I've got a ton of name value, but at least, helps. Yeah. So it's opened up a lot of opportunities for me to be able to do things I wanted to do.
Which we're going to segue right now over to your newest project on the Fight. I always want to say the Fight Network, but it's not the Canadian channel network. It's Fight TV streaming on Fight TV, and it's called So Says Shernoff. So you want to? What is that going to consist of?
Yeah, so first of all, I called it the Fight Network for the longest time, too.
It's hard because I listen to, Sunday night's main event all the time, or The Law is what it used to be called. And, they were always in connection to Fight, Fight Network. And so it's hard to really, when you put the Fight word in there, it's like, oh, it's a tongue twister.
So now sometimes I'll just say Fight TV Network. So, because that sounds even bigger.
I like that.
But so what happened there was I started, so I was doing the podcast with Bill, and I'm still doing the podcast with Bill, but Bill is a very, he's like the nicest guy you'll ever meet, and he's very straight-laced in a lot of ways. And I have a tendency to be very sarcastic with my delivery, and I'm a trained comedic actor, and I've written comedy before, and so and that was always my style, was always more that sarcastic style. So as time went on, I got a little bit more comfortable. Bill would say things, and I'd kind of shoot some sarcasm back at him, and Bill was never a huge fan of sarcasm, so he in the beginning didn't really get how to respond to me.
Right.
And worse than that, his fan base was an incredibly loyal fan base to him.
Which is a whole demographic in itself. It's probably ranging back from the Crockett era.
Exactly. And they're not really, my demographic, so to speak.
Exactly.
And
it's Tommy Young and that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically he just gets phone calls from Tommy Young all the time saying, but no, so he would have these people, and it's true. And some of them, like, I'll say, like, okay, well, who is this guy? Oh, he's like 70 something years old or whatever. I'm like, okay. And they'll say things like, I'll make a joke, and they'll be like, and we'll start getting like hate mail sent in to me, like, we think Josh is being very disrespectful to Bill. And there have been times where even Bill's come on the show and been like, listen, guys, I've known Josh his entire life. We're friends. He's not, because a lot of them see me as just this, who is this guy who came out of nowhere, right? And is being disrespectful to Bill Apter. And
you're the hill.
What's that?
You're the hill.
Yeah, right. So absolutely. And Bill has, and then when I started being the heel, Bill was like, that's amazing. You got to keep doing that. You got to keep doing that. So then people will be like, oh, I think Josh was really like, okay, I did an episode by myself because just Bill's traveling and it just didn't work out to be able to do it together. Yeah. So I covered it myself, and I made a joke in there where I said something along the lines of, I'm going to give you my full opinion this week uninterrupted. And apparently people reached out to Bill and were like, you really sounded like he didn't want to have you be a part of the show. And I'm like, oh my God, like, come on, like, are you kidding me?
In an age where kayfabe is supposed to be dead.
Right. And Bill says to me, he goes, what should I tell him? I said, well, for starters, you could tell them he's being a heel the way I asked him to. Mm-hmm. But Bill, like, again, he's very protective of his fan base because they've been great to him. And, and he really, really, he cares about his fans, and, as he should, Right. But unfortunately there was a little bit of a disconnect. And I said to him, I said, I'm trying to build something here. What it is, I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely knew that I was trying to build some place for myself back in the wrestling business. Right. And I told him, I said, I just kind of feel like while I love doing the show with you, I need another outlet that's going to allow people to see me for who I am and see
perspective too.
Exactly, and see my comedy for what it is. Because if you're tuning in to a satirical comedy show, which is what my show is, it's basically like a fake news show before that term had a totally different meaning to it. Exactly. But it's more of like a Daily Show or Colbert Report type thing. Mm-hmm. And so I said I want to do something like that which uses my education in comedic writing and the acting ability. I said, I want to do that because I want people to be able to look at that and go, oh, I get it. It's a character.
Right.
Right. So, and even when
it's kind of like the context of how we do when we actually text on social media. It's hard for you to read the actual context of what the person is saying until you actually see them visually.
I think that is a perfect analogy. I really like that because that is true. How many times have you read someone's text and you're just like looking at it, you're like, okay, they're either really pissed or they're joking, or they're not even paying attention and just
or they're being sarcastic or condescending, or
exactly. And so sarcasm is another thing when it's just audio can sometimes become very difficult to interpret. Yeah. So Bill kind of gave me the blessing to go off and, try whatever thing it is I wanted to do. So that's when I created So Says Shernoff. And my original plan was that I was going to do and the reason it's So Says Shernoff is that's my Twitter handle. It's at So Says Shernoff, which this ties back to Bill even more. When I started my wrestling career at 15, so I was pretty young. Wow. I was going by the name Superstar Rocky Styles, like a really,
that sounds like really like 90s indie.
Yeah, you really like. I had that since I was like a kid wrestling in my basement. So, but and I'm trying to come up with like my catchphrase or whatever. And I was on AIM with AOL Instant Message which totally dates me here with Bill. And I'm talking to him about something, and Bill responds, "So says you." And I thought to myself, that's kind of an interesting phrase. Mm-hmm. So I was like, "So says the superstar." So that's how I would end my promos, and I had that on the back of some of my gear and stuff. So when I was trying to find to get back into wrestling and try to find a new Twitter handle. And I was like, yeah, why not that? So it says Shernoff. That's kind of fun. Like, you know, it was a little like shout out that only myself and like 3 other people would get, but you know, but it came from there. So when I decided to do the show, it was more or less like, this is my opportunity to be on a soapbox. And as you can tell from this interview, I like to talk and hear myself talk.
Well, you're the good kind to have on a show like this.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's true. When I do the interviews with people, I love the people who just keep going, because then I don't really have to, you know, I can just kind of sit back. And,
the silent people that I have on the show apparently are big ratings bringers.
Well, I've done interviews before where it's like pulling teeth to I'll ask a question and their answer will be like, yeah. And I'm like,
thank God,
all right.
I have yet, knock on wood or plastic or whatever the hell's around me right now, that I've not gone through that in all the interviews I've ever done.
Well, I won't tell you who it was who I had to do that with, but because he's much bigger than me, so I'm not gonna go there. But yeah, pretty much, yeah. But which is why my wrestling career didn't pan out. But so I was doing the So Says Shernoff show, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this as a Survivor Series special, and it'll just be, you know, and it was just me sitting in my home office. And I just kind of, you know, I filmed it, and it was what it was. And it got a really good reaction. And my thought was like, hey, you know, if this gets good reaction, maybe I'll do it again for the Royal Rumble. Right. But it got such a good reaction, I was like, well, maybe I'll do it in December for TLC. And it was kind of just, you know, like a little bit of like a history, and then lead into whatever pay-per-view was coming up for the WWE. Right. And then through doing a radio show at Montgomery County Community College in Pennsylvania, I started talking to people, made some connections, and was able to use their amazing video studio that they have there. Awesome. Yeah, so that was how I ended up. So my first episode is filmed in my office in my house, and my second episode is in a studio with an audience there. And
great evolutionary
yeah. No, it was crazy. And so the audience, and I will say, some people think there wasn't really a live studio audience. Yeah. There was. We also added some canned audience as well to fill it up.
Hell, WWE does it all the time. Why not you?
I know, but we're not going to do that anymore because it did not sound good. So, and people thought it was fake when it was actually the real audience. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of that.
It's kind of like when you're watching like old school Happy Days and you just hear like the crowd go off and it sounds the same every single time the fonts
exactly. Because you know they recorded it one time and they just kept playing it every time for the rest of the series. But yeah, so that's kind of how it came to be, and then how the show itself came to be. And then Bill saw it, and when he got over the fear of all the heat that I was going to get for making jokes at wrestlers' expense, right. He thought it was great, and he told me, he goes, you know, I think this would be a great thing for Fight TV. Yeah. And he reached out to Mike Weber, who's the COO of Fight TV. Right. And then Mike, and then I guess he reached out to Mike saying, is it okay if I have Josh reach out to you? And so I reached out to him, and he and I hopped on a call, and by the end of the call, he was, you know, sending me over an agreement, and yeah, so it was like a whirlwind, and I am still I can't believe that I'm having a show on there, right. But I'm very much looking forward to it, and we're expecting to have a pretty decent turnout. You know, you saw the event that was being promoted there. So right now, if everybody who says they're interested shows up, I really don't know where they're going to sit because there's not that much space.
If they're indie wrestler, you know, fan base, they know how to handle it.
Yeah, they'll just stand all
stand
along.
Room only is how we do. So
yeah, so that's kind of the very long and short of it, of how that came to be. I don't know if that answered your.
Oh, absolutely. So basically, the theme of the show is it going to be like just a random amount of different subjects that you're going to cover, or is it actually wrestling based, or what's the program structure?
So it's always wrestling based, and the tagline with So Says Shernoff, it's wrestling news as real as the action. So that's kind of like a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of following a format now where originally, like I said, the first two were based on the WWE's pay-per-view, which for the time being, we're going to maintain. And that's kind of our timetable of when we're going to do it. So the last segment of the show, it's broken into about 3 segments. And the last segment of the show is always going to be kind of a preview, a look at that Sunday's pay-per-view.
Right.
So that's going to be this, the Royal Rumble for this episode.
So is it going to be based on every time a pay-per-view comes out, or is it going to be like...
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's going to be once a month.
An aftermath show, pretty much.
It's actually going to be beforehand.
So it's a preview show.
Yeah, it airs the Thursday before the pay-per-view. So now the second episode, we did things like I went kind of a man on the street type thing where I went around the ECW arena. They had an event there, and I went around interviewing fans about their favorite weapons. And that was segment 2, was kind of cutting to that, and that was a lot of fun. And I know the whole catalog, both episodes before Fight TV are going to be on Fight TV. So the entire show will be there.
Right.
And I think that I'm going to be starting up a YouTube page soon, which will probably just be youtube.com/so-says-Shernoff.
Right.
And that's going to have smaller things and maybe some things that we don't want to put onto the show for Fight. But also we'll probably have some of the segments like that ECW, which was like 7 minutes long. Yeah. Like that will be on there. So there'll be a lot of things on there, a lot of like bonus features. Or, if you wanted to just watch that or show that segment to a friend again, you don't want them to sit down and watch the whole show, they could go to the YouTube and check that out.
Awesome.
But format wise, we're going to start off with headlines, which I have not done before, but starting with the show on the 24th, we'll start with headlines. So I know I'm going to be talking about All Elite Wrestling, and I'm not sure what else at this point, but
nothing else really has been talked about since
AEW
right at this point. So
so it's just going to be All Elite Wrestling and kind of talk about the rally, and it's definitely not it's not news, and like when I referenced it being kind of fake news, I'm going to talk about this stuff, but I'm more or less just going to kind of make a couple of observational jokes about it. I mean, I guess if you haven't paid any attention to wrestling at all, you could technically get some news from what I'm talking about. But for the most part,
we'll talk about the awareness of it, but you have to be an insider.
Right.
Well, I don't want to say insider, but you got to be a part of the core group to understand exactly.
I mean, you have to be a fan.
Yeah.
Right. You have to be a fan because if I'll give a little bit of backstory to it, but for the most part, I'm going to be speaking as though everybody understands.
There's an implied. I get it. Absolutely. So what comes down to, and we're going to talk about 2019 because I listened to the recent episode with you and Bill talking about, AEW and everything, the rally and all this stuff. But here's my question for you before we even get to that point. What was the actual event or match or whatever that got you into wrestling in the first place? Because you briefly mentioned that you got in from Bill Apter in a sense, but what was the match that really was like, I got to do this, I want to be a part of this, I'm a fan of this?
Yeah, so I mean, I was a fan long before Bill moved into my neighborhood.
Wow, you got lucky.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. And in fact, we were coming back from one of my friend's 10th birthday parties, and my mom says my brother and I in the car, she's like, hey, do you know who Bill Apter is? And we're like, yeah, of course. He's from the magazines, all that. And she's like, oh yeah, he's moving into our neighborhood. Wow. And we just lost our minds there. So, but yeah, no, I'm trying to think, I don't have a name, like I remember.
Or even a promo.
Everything, but no, I don't know what my first thing was. I just remember all of a sudden becoming a fan of like I just always remember being a fan of it. I know my brother remembers, he's 2 years older than me, and he remembers getting I guess it would have been WrestleMania 4, renting it from the video store. Right. WrestleMania 4, like the 2-tape thing there, the VHS.
The one that was like, it was like only an hour and a half, then you got to go to part B and then the part C.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, if you kids today don't understand what we went through.
Yeah, Google what a VHS is.
And then we had to rewind all that stuff back and take it back.
I know. Yeah, be kind, please rewind or whatever. But no, so I would have to assume that it was around that point in time that I either stumbled upon WrestleMania 4, which I would have been 4 years old at the time, or that I would have if that's when my brother was really getting into it, then that's when I would have started just kind of seeing it. And to me, I grew up, when I was like a real little kid, I was a huge He-Man fan. Like I'm talking like when I was like a year old, 2 years old. And I still have, some of their action figures and stuff in my office, on display. But I was a huge He-Man fan. And if you look at it, pro wrestling, if you're growing up and you're looking at a show like He-Man and then you see pro wrestling, you're just like, oh my God, this is real. This is He-Man real life. Yeah, this is He-Man in real life. So it was I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was an easy transition.
Especially the way the WWF at the time put it together, because it was really it really kept with that cartoony theme.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, though, the guy that I was a fan of from day one was Bret Hart. Which is funny because you talk about a He-Man, you'd think, well, Hulk Hogan is
Hulk Hogan, a warrior or whatever.
Right. No, I was a Bret Hart fan. I was way back when he was in the Hart Foundation.
Right.
So I would say I really became a fan probably around like the late 80s. Would probably be when I really started watching all the time.
Range.
Yeah, probably around that time. And then it's just been ever since then. So I don't have my first thing that I saw, but I have tons of memories from that time. I do know my first live event.
Oh, what was that?
So it was at the old Spectrum in Philadelphia.
I miss that place.
Yeah.
Well, that and the Civic Center. They're both near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. I always just went to the Spectrum. I never went to the Civic Center.
See, you were near the Spectrum. I'm pretty sure were you always in the Montgomery County area, or?
Yeah.
See, I'm from like West Philly. Well, formerly from Southwest, by way of University City. That's where I'm at now.
Right. So
however,
then you would have,
yeah, I was in Southwest, which was near the Civic Center, and of course NWA, that was their territory, and we used to always hit that. And then if need be or necessary, we would stretch out to go to South Philly for the Spectrum.
Yeah, no, I was always more of I was like a WWF guy. That was my, and then I would watch
chocolate.
Yeah, right. So I would watch the like WCW Monday or WCW Saturday Night.
Yeah.
I used to watch that all the time, but otherwise, I don't think I ever even knew that they were in town,
Right.
But I do remember my first show. The first match I ever saw was the Genius Lanny Poffo versus Hercules. That was the very first match of the show, and I know the second match was Bret Hart versus Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Wow.
It was when Greg was doing it was when he was doing the rhythm and blues thing. But I can't be sure. So actually, I know I have pictures of that somewhere. So I'll have to look it up.
My first WWF live event I've ever went to at Spectrum was when Ric Flair came and wrestled Hulk Hogan.
Oh, okay. So that was a few years later, because I know the main event of mine was Mr. Perfect and Hulk Hogan.
My first wrestling event was probably late 86 or 87 at the Civic Center, and for the NWA and all that stuff. So, it was funny because I wasn't a fan at first of WWF because I felt like Hulk Hogan getting his butt whipped or his ass whipped for all the day long, and all of a sudden pops back up was like, come on.
Well, right, and that's the thing. You grew up watching. I
Dusty
think
Rhodes, pretty much.
Yeah, you grew up watching better wrestling in a lot of ways.
I never really want to say better per se, but they took things a tiny bit more realistic.
I'd say better. I think in ring, and I don't think that it means that the ability wasn't there of the talent on the other side, but I think the WWF was very much, it was cartoony. It was very,
entertainment based, like Vince always says,
Yep. But that's cool though.
Yeah. But so the thing is, at this point, let's flip over to 1990 2019 at this point. we had an interesting 2018. We got 2019, which looks like, in my opinion, maybe the resurgence of a boom period for this industry now. What do you see in this? I mean, we got AEW. We haven't seen anything yet. We just saw the rally and everything. But what are your high hopes, or if any high hopes, for this at this point?
So I'm really excited about AEW. I was lucky enough to be able to be at All In and be backstage at All In, which was really, where I actually had lunch with Lanny Poffo. Which was kind of great. And I told him, I said, you were the first match I ever saw live.
Wow.
And he was like, that's really weird. But, but I got to see, what that energy was like. Now, the energy is going to be a little bit different because this isn't Cody and the Bucks just putting on a show. And I don't mean that to minimize what All In was, because that was.
But now they got another foot in the door.
Right.
With the Khans,
that was an insane accomplishment. But the Khans, these guys, I've heard a lot of people go, it's a money mark, and I don't believe that. And maybe I just don't want to believe that. But I look at the Khans and I think you've got businessmen who you have entertainment and sports businessmen. And I think they are the perfect people to put sports entertainment, put that on a large platform. Right. I also think with Tony Khan being the wrestling fan that he is, and not just that he's a huge fan, but the type of fan that he is, that he could have a conversation the way you and I are having a conversation. He's not, to use that term, mark. He's not a mark in that regard.
He looks at it. He looks at it probably in the same way that we're looking at it, from an observant, from business aspect. Yeah. And he
gets it that way.
Well, first of all, Tony, from what I understand, Tony Khan, from what I understand, was a long-time Wrestling Observer subscriber. So for him to be that, in that sense, he knows the very detailed inside and out of what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, and I think he was like a contributor as well. I think he gave Cody a terrible review on a match at one point or something. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard him say. But
he's really, I've heard that he's really hardcore into it. But then you have his father. Whether he is really involved in it or interested in it, he probably looked at the portfolio of what Vince McMahon is getting out of this and that new Fox deal and was like, I'm jumping. I'm getting in.
Yeah, and the opportunity is there. And I think that they need TV. Yeah. And I think that they're going to have it. I don't think Chris Jericho I've heard people say, Chris Jericho would have gone if the money was right. But you know what? I'm not entirely sure. I think at this point in time, I'm sure the money didn't hurt at all. But I think that Chris Jericho he does not want to be a part of a failure. He wants to be a part of a success. And
I think he's one of the smartest guys in the industry, bar none.
Yeah, absolutely.
He does not make a move unless he is absolutely sure. And I mean, his history of his career speaks for itself. If he is a living proverbial Oprah sticker. If you slap a Oprah sticker on something, that means something to the world. And he slapped himself right on AEW with an understanding that we may not know. And that one of them is they have 2 TV deals right now that they're working on. And
I heard him say that to Bubba on Busted Open.
Right, exactly. So I mean, for him to jump on with that guarantee or that knowledge, you got to believe it.
Yeah, and I think that he's just the first. Just because you haven't heard any other big surprises or whatever, I'm sure there are going to be more. I'm sure there are going to be more people jumping ship, so to speak. But I also think there's so much talent out there that there's talent in Ring of Honor, there's talent in New Japan, there's talent just on the indies wherever that. If you were to say, they're going to go to WWE, a lot of people, their first thought, and people have had this thought with Kenny Omega, where they've said I think they're going to ruin them. And there's talent that I think has the potential to really get over in a different environment. And I think you see that with NXT versus Raw and SmackDown.
Oh my God. You'll see contrast.
Guys, you'll see guys within the same company that, depending on the environment and depending on the presentation of their character, they are night and day. I mean, look at the Ascension, who a lot of people now
they were so over in NXT when they were first.
I know.
When they did
and
the
some people
Game
don't
of
even
Thrones
remember
gimmick.
that.
When they did the Game of Thrones gimmick, they were so over, and then all of a sudden they became Egyptian whatever it is right now.
Yeah, but another guy, you have like Tyler Breeze,
who just finished wrestling against Ricochet and had a phenomenal match, got the biggest ovation, goes back the next day, and it's crickets.
Yeah, and because some characters and some talent just doesn't work in a certain setting, and that's not always anyone's fault. And it's very quick, it's very easy to quickly go, because the writers or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, no, sometimes it's just the fans. It's a different type of fan that likes Raw and SmackDown versus NXT.
Versus the hardcore.
Exactly, and so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of talent with AEW. I'm very curious to see what their presentation is going to look like. Yeah. Because I know what All In looked like, but again,
that was
it's
financed
not
by them,
really
wasn't it?
them.
It
was financed by them. There was a lot of help from a lot of various places.
Right,
I know
correct.
Ring of Honor. I remember when I first walked in the back door there, I walk in, the first thing I see are a bunch of Ring of Honor's like production carts, and stuff like that. So they ended up getting a lot of help and cooperation from a lot of people, from the NWA, from Ring of Honor, so I think that it'll be interesting to see what it's going to look like now. But when I walked into that arena, it reminded me of WCW in the best way.
Yeah.
And like the height of WCW, and it just had that feel. It didn't feel, the WWE, when I last time I went to one of their shows was back in January.
Yeah.
And
Royal Rumble, pretty much.
I was actually there for the Raw and the SmackDown after the Rumble. And it just felt like quiet in there. It was just, it did not have the energy that it used to have.
Or it had the day before and the day before that.
And I think that's a really valid.
Because I went to NXT Philadelphia.
Okay.
And that was a whole new ball game.
Oh no, that I heard was insane.
Oh my God, that was. I could not have been a happier fan. I haven't been to a live event in ages, and I was like, "There's no way in hell I'm not making a takeover."
Yeah.
Name one bad takeover.
And again, there's the thing. You've got that now. You're talking about environments. You're talking about the same building. So again, that's just the presentation. And I think there's a lot of opportunity with All Elite Wrestling to fill that void that WCW left. And it's not because it was WCW, but it's that void of that true alternative, that true number 2 promotion. And I don't think they're trying to compete with the WWE at all. I think they're trying to compete with themselves. Yeah, they just want to be an alternative, and I think they're going to be very successful. I really do. I think they're going to be very successful.
When we say no competition, we also have, you mentioned Ring of Honor. We haven't even talked about New Japan Pro Wrestling, who in all cases, we're all in collaboration with each other. Now there's a certain business aspect, changing. Is a change in the wind because of this new promotion out, and Ring of Honor is working with, say, is working with New Japan, but New Japan's main act is gone and going there on their own, and there's this situation where there's this trifecta here where we're trying to figure out, will they actually work together? And because it feels like the territory is coming back in some cases, because everybody's buying now. Everybody's up for sale and buying up every talent and closing them out and not allowing them to make appearances everywhere. And you got what could be the new generation NWA in a sense here with AEW, New Japan, and Ring of Honor. And Kenny Omega is in the middle of all this, because wherever he goes is going to play a factor on New Japan, who also in Ring of Honor, who also will be at Madison Square Garden. Right.
And I think that, and then not to mention, you talk about the NWA, there's also the NWA. So, I think Kenny Omega is going to go to All Elite. Wrestling. I don't see him going to the WWE or anywhere else. I think he's going to go to All Elite Wrestling.
I think people for people who like didn't see the latest All Elite, well, not the latest All Elite, but the All Elite for New Year's, where they announced that they were doing AEW.
Oh, being the Elite, yeah.
You're being the Elite. I'm sorry. There was an end credit scene there that people. I'm really surprised that people have not noticed this end credit scene where they showed Kenny's missing phone and the clock was ticking. And he said he lost his phone, and it's like, okay, I'm sorry, but that sounds like an indication that he already made his decision right there.
Yeah, and I think that was a good catch, and I think that I think he's going to go there. I think I don't know when Marty Scurll's contract is up with Ring of Honor, but I'd be incredibly surprised if he didn't go.
Pending they don't give him a better contract with any hopes of being champion.
Yeah, right. And so, and then there's the other thing. Something that I think is fantastic is it looks like they're not putting Cody in the World Championship scene for All Elite Wrestling. It looks like it's going to be somebody else, which is what it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think Cody's gonna be doing a lot of stuff backstage. But yeah, it's it has this opportunity to create that alternative. It has this opportunity for fans to. What I'm hoping for, and this is, and I may have said this on the podcast that you listen to, but one of the things that I'm really, really hoping for is that they are going to pull people away from the WWE. And that sounds like I'm saying because I want the WWE to fail.
Are you talking as far as talent?
I'm talking about fans.
Fans, okay. Yeah.
And talent. And talent. Yeah, I think they are going to take talent. I think there's going to be a lot of guys that are misused.
I tell you what, it won't be AJ Styles. He's right now. I would love to be AJ Styles.
Yeah. Oh, AJ Styles. He should go wherever the money's going to be.
I mean, his contract is almost up in about like another few weeks.
Yeah, and that's the thing with AJ. You look at him, and he has got a bartering chip that's insane, and you also have to look at his age. I mean, the guy's in his 40s at this point. Wherever he signs now is probably going to be where he is for the remainder of his full-time active career.
You know, it's funny. And I've actually. I went to I used to go to Ring of Honor around the 2003 era. Matter of fact, my first event was it was Final Battle, I believe, and it was I think that was the name of it was. No, it wasn't Final Battle, was it? It was the debut of Samoa Joe.
Oh wow!
As he fought Low Ki, and one of the most hard-hitting fights I've ever seen in person. I mean, it was brutal, but AJ Styles would always wrestle there too, and he was wrestling that event as well. And the AJ Styles that we see now is a much more seasoned, not nearly as aerodynamic version that we see now. So, he needs to know where he can lay and pray, but still give the best that he could give.
Yeah, and I think AJ has he would have a lot of opportunity in both places. But and Joe is a guy too that, my hope is, and this is kind of what I was saying was I hope that fans, if they like what AEW is doing, I hope that is reflected in Raw's ratings and SmackDown's ratings. And the reason is I think that is what the WWE needs to get that kick in the ass to create a better product, to do more with the talent that they have. Because they have a lot of wasted talent. I mean, they talked about their new era that they're doing. Their new era has been terrible. Yeah. There's not been a single change. And I'm sorry, just because you've had EC3 and show up in backstage things for 5 seconds and not even speak, if anything, all you've done is already, ruin him, make him look less.
Where's the premiere? Where's the big Jericho type of, debut?
Exactly. None of that is there. I look at a guy like Bobby Roode, who should be there. He should be heading into WrestleMania as the WWE champion, as the heel. Yeah. Right. And instead he's doing what? hanging out with Chad Gable, who's like cosplaying as Bobby Roode. It's like,
which is also horrible because he's a phenomenal worker himself.
Exactly.
In his own
respect. Chad Gable should have just been put in his own. I mean, even if they brought him into 205 Live because he's smaller and let him him and a guy like Buddy Murphy, like they could tear that up.
A title reign with him would be so awesome.
Yeah. And it's, so there's so much that they're doing wrong that I hope that a little alternative, even if it's not direct competition, that I hope alternatives, having an alternative will help them to step up and head in the right direction. Right. I also think there are guys think about Gallows and Anderson.
I just spoke about that. I asked a question to a couple of friends of mine just about that. I'm like, just say, out of the park type of question. And I'll ask you that because AJ Styles and them are all friends. If there's ever a chance, and this is probably a big shot in the dark, if there's ever a chance that AJ Styles negotiating with his contract, do you possibly think that he would look out for those two, considering the bad rep that they got when they got there and they were just held captive with nothing to do, and they're now doing this nerd? I can't stand that he's doing the Revenge of the Nerds gimmick. I can't.
It's just awful.
It is. It's
awful. Yeah.
Those guys were they were superstars in Japan.
Yeah. And I think that if they're smart, they would go to All Elite Wrestling if the door is open for them. And I'm
pretty sure it is.
I'm sure it is. I can't.
Majority of their friends are over there.
Yeah, they're very close with that. They have a great relationship with them. Both of those guys are incredibly, hardworking talents who have been saddled with these unwatchable gimmicks. I just can't. I can't stand it. And I'm sometimes watching like a guy like Carl Anderson, who is so talented in the ring, and I am angry at the WWE for how much I hate it when Carl Anderson comes on television. Yeah. Because that's their fault. I'm sorry. I really believe that that's the WWE's fault.
No. This reminds me exactly. You got to understand, I am a person who does not settle. So if I see something not of quality, I immediately jump out. I'm not a sheep to the system. And basically, when TNA was killing all the talent that I see come from Ring of Honor that I know could really be top stars, that I know can really put in some what they did with Nigel McGuinness, what they did with Samoa Joe, what they did with Loki.
God.
It hurt me so bad because I've met these guys, I've known these guys, Christopher Daniels. I mean, AJ Styles when they bleached his hair and made him look like a Ric Flair clone.
Joe in the beginning in TNA was fantastic.
He was. I mean, I remember when he first won the X title, and when the minute that I can never forget this is one of the memorable moments we don't see anymore. The minute that Impact came on, the first thing you saw was Samoa Joe doing an Olay kick to, I believe, AJ Styles' face or something like that, because they already preempted the actual title match of it. And it just like, whoa, what did I just see? And I'm sticking right here and finding out what I'm going on. It was like, from that point on, it was like there, and then Vince Russo came in, and then Hulk Hogan came in, and then Kevin Nash came in, and Dixie Carter was just all starstruck. It just went down from there, and I was just like, I can't do this. So I immediately rebelled, and now Raw and SmackDown, I'm kind of on that kick too. I'm only watching NXT at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there are many times that I've watched Raw and SmackDown, and I've just said, like, if I didn't have to cover it this week on a podcast, I don't think I'd be watching.
Right.
But I can't give an honest opinion on it just from reading what other people are saying about it. I have to, I have to watch it, and it's awful that I have to sometimes.
It's part of the biz.
Yeah, and it's very upsetting because, as a lifelong wrestling fan, it's kind of like offensive that they're putting out such crap. And so I'm looking forward to somebody else doing something better. I want to see, the more alternatives there are, the healthier the business is going to be for the talent, for the fans. Why wouldn't anyone want that,
Right. Let me give you one more question before we move on to the video game aspect of things, the actual A.C.M.G. aspect of things. But our disdain, the source of that disdain is going to one person, and that's Vince McMahon. I mean, at the end of the day, he's the end-all be-all of these decisions. Is it time for them to have a non-Vince McMahon existence in order to make Raw and SmackDown what we know it can be? because we see what Hunter's doing or Paul is doing over at NXT with the group that he's working with. They're making Dusty Rhodes, God rest his soul, very happy with what he left there.
Right.
And I literally get excited every time I watch NXT. I totally believe that in order for them to compete with AEW, hell, New Japan, and some extent, and then Ring of Honor, money is the only reason why they're beating those two, to be honest. The money and the sponsorships that they're getting, and that huge contract that they're getting from Fox. But other than that, the quality is just, they got it. Well, first of all, I believe they really got to change when they go to Fox. But do you see a non-Vince McMahon, existence a better thing for them?
Well, first of all, I'll say as long as Vince McMahon is breathing,
it ain't happening.
There's not going to be a non-Vince McMahon. I think that it's tough to say. It's always easy to kind of jump on that, like, oh, Vince is out of touch bandwagon. And in some ways, I definitely think he is. I do sometimes think, that Triple H is sitting back there going like, oh God, there's so many amazing things I could do with this if given the opportunity, Which
is why he has NXT now. And I truly believe his intentions is to really, like, I always joked about it because of the jab of the name of the pay-per-views are always TakeOver. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's kind of really saying it to you right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. They're taking over. They're that was their intention. And, I think if Vince stepped down,
actually get some sleep.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it would, it's not just one man. Yes. Everything at the end of the day goes through him.
Well, they also said, Dunn too.
Yeah, Kevin Dunn is one that I think he, has a lot to say about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's such what I think with them is I think they're in a bubble, and I think it's such a fast moving machine, that it's sometimes really, I think it's really hard to write the TV, as much as they're writing it, as many hours as they're writing. Mm-hmm. However, I also think that there are people who can do it. So if you can't do it, if it's really hard and you can't do it, then leave and have somebody else do it.
Absolutely. I remember Jimmy Jacobs was on one of the radio shows or whatever and was talking about that too. Like, he had a whole different perspective when he became a writer.
Right.
At that point.
And, and I think that, Vince McMahon, at the end of the day, he's Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
He's, he has a proven track record, but he's also made some mistakes. And I think Vince works well off of other people's talent. I think he is, well, not just that. No, I mean, I think, yes, competition, because I think it gets his creative juices flowing. I think Vince couldn't be happier about All Elite Wrestling.
Right.
I think he deep down, I think he's itching for a fight and has been for 20 years. Right. And I think that and this is all just, my opinion. I don't know Vince,
right,
and so I can't really say, but this is the vibe that I get from it. I think that he needs the talent around him, the creative around him, to be coming up with something really good that he can then put his finishing touches on. Mm-hmm. And I think that what's happening is I'm not sure they're coming up with anything good. And I'm not sure that, I think they're in their bubble. So they're just like, they're super excited about one guy. So we'll just push him to the moon.
Yeah.
And then, they make mistakes because, Braun Strowman, to me, he's really lost his shine after they turned him heel.
Yeah.
They turned him heel and then they turned him back when Roman Reigns had to go out.
Yeah.
And he never, to me, it's just bleh, it's not really like, I think the one guy there, and people always rag on me because he's a friend of mine, but Drew McIntyre, I think if I had never met him before in my life, I believe I'd still say the same thing, that Drew is their biggest star they have right now.
This version of Drew. Definitely, especially.
Oh God, yeah, this version.
Especially. I mean, you saw the potential back then, but things happen and it did what it did. But it was a great thing to happen.
Well, I'll tell you, and I remember because when I was down in OVW, I was there for a short amount of time. And I remember when Drew first got there, and I'd only been there for a short amount of time, and Drew got there and he worked, I think he worked a dark match at the OVW TV taping. And I want to say it was Michael Hayes was there and a couple other people, but they, at the end of it, were just like, you know, they're critiquing everybody, and they go to Drew and they go, don't change a thing. You can't get better than that. That's natural talent. And I remember looking at it going like, I mean, you know, good looking dude. Like he went in like, yeah, he's a solid worker, but you know, they saw something in him. And
that was when he was nowhere near as big as he is now.
Oh, no, not at all. They saw something in him. And as I got to know him, and I used to travel with him in OVW, and as I got to know him on a personal level, I know him he's just, you know, a super nice guy, like really, you know, not to kill his gimmick, but he's a great guy. Right. Loves this business, is very passionate about it, and is an incredibly hard worker. But I saw him as, this dude should be Intercontinental Champion. This guy could be this. It wasn't until he left the WWE and got out on the indies where I said, like, I felt when he was in 3MB, I was like, they're really, really missing out on him. Yeah. But I didn't realize what he could be. And when I first saw some of the stuff he was doing on the indies, I remember I shot him a text and was just like, dude, just congratulations on on reinventing yourself and everything you're doing. And he just, I mean, it's amazing what he has turned himself into. And he is such a hard worker and a reliable, honest person. And I think that that's something that they see. And, you know, I can't wish him enough success. Right. So I'm hoping that they're going to kind of strap the rocket to him and see where it goes.
It feels like it is leading to that. So it's just a matter of time. We live in a short attention society right now, so everything has to be now. But you know, the slow growth, you gotta, you know, the slow build, you gotta just, you know, wait for it. It'll eventually come.
But I mean, I think they screwed things up with having him, you know, lose to Ziggler a couple times, and little things like that. Like slow build, I totally agree with. But let it keep being a build. Don't knock them down.
But,
you know?
I mean, you see the slow build that they do in NXT and other promotions. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, I can tell you some of the biggest slow builds. Hell, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn have been building their rivalry from 3 different promotions in the past years.
You know what? And that was an amazing thing. And that's another thing with NXT is that they'll do slow builds, but they're not sacrificing the other guys in the meantime. You know, they're keeping them separate and they're building them up. So, but I mean, this is something, I mean, we could fill 10 episodes talking about this.
So let's go on to, I mean, we talked about this before we even got to the show. Like, wrestling video games have been something that, like, even to this day, because I'm a designer. So for some reason, not only am I a wrestling fan, but I love creating everything. What games that you were playing when you were younger, do you have a favorite?
So my favorite, I think we talked about this, my favorite of all time would be No Mercy.
Salute.
I stand by the fact that, as I think anyone who's played No Mercy,
religiously
stands by. Yeah, it's just in some ways I can't even put my finger on why. It's just the best game. It really is.
I could give you 3 letters. AKI. The Aki engine that they used for the game to put it together, it was so awesome.
Right. Well, and I remember before that, like the WCW
versus the World and
NWO World Tour or whatever those. You know, I remember those and just being like, man, this is a really fun game. And then when it became No Mercy and the Create a Wrestler on there, and sometimes, you know, less is more, and having a Create a Wrestler that wasn't where you had to use your own creativity to make it look like somebody, somehow made that better than actually using the real guy's face, if that's at all possible. But
I totally get it. It was not only that, just the fact that the story mode that they had on there too was awesome as well, because you had a story mode that came off like a tournament bracket, and whichever direction that you go, you can change the ending, you could change it any way you want to. of how it goes. So it's like a different story every single time you go in. Something that I wish they would do in the recent iteration, which by the way, I believe it's been the best. It's the best WWE game since No Mercy. And that's saying a lot.
Is this the one that just came out?
19, yeah. Because I had so much beef with the game from last year, and any of my listeners know I would complain wholeheartedly because I got it for the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4, but the Nintendo Switch has so many issues that they had to, and bugs and everything that they weren't ready for it. But also some other things that were, it was just unforgivable. So I was hesitant to get 19 at this point, and lo and behold, they corrected it majorly, and it does give me that old, sort of kind of that old No Mercy type of feeling out of it. Because one, to create a character is like the best of any game ever. Mm-hmm. You can literally create anything that you want, or anybody.
It was just amazing. I mean, I feel like I spent more time doing the creator wrestler. Yeah. And changing the guys and updating the guys, and
that was cool. And for the first time, you actually got to come out with the belt too, and that was always a big deal for me. Yeah, it was just a really, really cool game. And there are other ones like I have, as far as memories of them and stuff. I'll remember the first game that I ever had I think it was just called WrestleMania. Oh God, the original one for the Nintendo.
Yeah, from the 80s. And
when you were like Andre the Giant, he walked her headbutt all the way through.
Yeah, and you guys were just you'd punch and things would just fly out of them, and it was weird, The
music was good on that one though.
It was really good. They had all the the MIDI versions of the guys' music. No, it was great. And there are a lot of other, I remember trying to think some of the names of them. But I remember all from the 90s, a lot of those, the early 90s. Mm-hmm. I know there was my brother had Rage in the Cage.
Oh, wow.
Which was always that was it was all right. But I remember, which one I loved? Royal Rumble. I loved Royal Rumble, and it wasn't a particularly amazing
was that the
game.
Version, or was that the actual sort of kind of In Your House?
Well, In Your House, I think wasn't In Your House more where they were
you were just
videos
button mashing like crazy and all types of cartoony things would come out.
No. It wasn't like that. Royal Rumble was more of the it was kind of an evolution off of because that was Super Nintendo.
Yes.
So it was kind of an evolution.
It was
off
the arcade version where every there were 4 people that were coming in the ring every so often.
Something like that, yeah.
Big
it was
Boss
really.
Man
but I remember
was in it and a few other people.
Yeah, I remember Yokozuna.
Yeah. Was
in it, and I remember he was so much bigger than the other guys, but still seemed really small somehow. But it was, it was one of the last ones where they were, what do they call those? Sprites? Is that what they call them?
Yes, correct.
And it was the last one that was that type of thing that I remember, at least, that was drawn. Mm-hmm. I guess Rage in a Cage probably came out around the same time. Right. But then I remember they started doing where it was it was more like that Mortal Kombat look, where the guys were actual videos of the guys, Yeah. And then that was kind of a change, but I do have one fun fact I think I shared with you before, which was in 2002, there was a game I had it for Xbox. I think it was also for the PC, but WWF Raw.
Oh, Lord, yes.
So
I remember that one.
So this kind of ties in again with my relationship with Bill Apter. Mm-hmm. So Bill was working for WoW magazine at the time, and I was at a show with a buddy of mine, JD, and he and I went to this show, and I want to say it was called PWF. I think it was Steve Carino's promotion at the time, and so Bill has us backstage to ask us which WCW, because it was right after when this took place, was right after the WWF bought WCW.
Yeah.
So
it was 2001. Pretty much. Yeah.
So this WoW magazine thing, he wanted us to say what's one star we want to see in the WWF, and I think mine was Scott Steiner, but we did that, and then what he did was he took pictures of us to go next to our little blurb in the magazine. So I'm there and I'm wearing a t-shirt. I think I may have actually been wearing my Wild Samoan Training Center t-shirt. But I'm wearing a white t-shirt and I've got like a blue baseball cap on. And he took one of me and he took one of my buddy JD. And they ended up in WoW Magazine. Well, lo and behold, I get WWF Raw. And, about a year later or so. And I'm flipping through, checking things out, looking at the creator wrestler. Because you always got to go right to the creator wrestler and see what's going on. So they had, if you remember, in like they would have like little images of the guys that you would choose.
The template
whoever
guys.
Whoever you wanted your like image to be or whatever. And you could choose the wrestlers, or you could choose, they had like monsters and stuff. They had like ridiculous things. And then they had generic guys. And it may have been more, but I remember at least 2 generic guys. And it was me and my friend JD. And now one of the things that we looked at was, so JD was just kind of like, just a regular kind of dude, but he kind of like the picture, he kind of had this like goofy smile, like it was, and I'm looking at him going, okay, for me, because obviously the guys drew this, they flipped open because it was a drawing. It wasn't the actual picture.
Yeah.
It was a drawing of the picture. So they obviously flipped open WoW Magazine and said, whatever, we'll use these guys.
Right.
And I was like, okay, for me, I ended up looking like generic kid with a baseball hat, right? JD looked like JD. He looked like, and I know that doesn't mean anything to you or any of your listeners.
Right.
But he has a very distinct look. There was no one else who was going to go, hey, that guy kind of looks like me. Why don't I use him for my creative guy?
Right.
There are a lot of people who could have looked at my picture and gone, generic guy with baseball bat, whatever. He looks like me, like I could put it on. Right. And I just thought it was the funniest thing. But so I actually have a challenge for your listeners.
Yeah.
Or for you can do this too. I will give a free t-shirt from either my prowrestlingtees.com/so says Shernoff page or the site exclusive shirts at so says Shernoff.com. I will give a free t-shirt to anybody who can get me a screen cap from that Raw game of the nondescript random guys.
This is going to be a needle in a haystack thing. I got a feeling.
All you need is somebody who has that Raw game. Because
well, here's the thing. Well, I could give another big help on that. YouTube.
I have tried to look on YouTube and find the create a wrestler thing, and I haven't been able to. But I'm sure the people who listen to this are far more well versed in doing this stuff than I am. But I am willing to give. What's that?
We got to look regional on this one.
Yeah, but no, I want. If someone can find that and you can tweet that to me at So Says Shernoff, I will send you a free shirt. If you can also find, if you can get that, and you can also tweet me a photo from the magazine, because I know I have it somewhere, but I have no idea where it is. It's been moved 1,000 times. It's probably in my basement. If you can get me that picture from the magazine, it would have been sometime in 2001 post the WWE buying WCW is WoW Magazine. And there's a little section of who do you want to see go over to the WWF.
Right.
If you can get that picture too, I will not only send you a free shirt, but I will give you a by name shout out on one of my episodes on Fight TV.
There you have it, people.
So that is what I'm throwing out there.
And you will be the hardest hardcore fan.
Yeah. Find that for me, and that is what I'm willing to do that.
So I got one more question. And again, Josh, thank you so much for being a part of the show. This has been awesome.
Oh, man, thank you. Thank you.
But by the way, before I even ask this question, do you know Stu Sachs?
Yeah.
Funny story, and I told you about this the degrees of separation of this whole entire our coming together here. Stu Sachs actually is a friend of one of my clients. I do multimedia development. And one of my clients, Randy Shine, shout out to him. He actually met Stu Sachs somewhere, somehow. He's a professional magician, and I say that in a way of he actually travels around the world, pretty much the same way like a worker in an industry.
What did you say his name was?
Randy Shine.
Randy Shine.
Stu wrote an article on the recent PWI 500, the one with Kenny Omega on the front cover for Randy. And Randy, I think, got a chance to rather meet or talk to Bill at some point. So the fact that I'm even meeting up with you right now is ridiculous. And it's
that's funny. I'm actually going to see if so my friend Calvin, who does anytime I do any of the on-location stuff for my show or for the APTER Chat, Calvin does the camera work.
Yeah.
Calvin is a professional magician. His name's Calvin Tan. And so he knows a lot of people who are in that whole community there.
I could give you his website and everything, his information, if you want to really.
Send that over. Yeah, send that over to me. But I'm going to ask Calvin if he knows Randy, because that could even be.
Yeah, Randy's been on like a lot of different things, especially throughout the years, like BET. He was on what was the show? Penn and Teller Fool Us.
Yeah, I'm sure he knows him. Sure he knows him. But yeah, that's funny though. Yeah, hey, it's a small world.
It really is.
And now with social media and everything, it's just getting smaller and smaller.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it could be a really good benefit if you know how to use it.
Absolutely.
Well, my last question to you is basically with you, training and your experience in the wrestling industry and, just learning a lot. If you had to think about one thing that you take with you, and I know there's probably a lot of things that you could take with you, but what would be the top of the mountain lesson that you would learn? Because I've always respected the wrestling industry, and I think that's what I'm a real fan of, is the hard work, the struggle, the artistry, the craftsmanship of it, and the business, and very much the business aspect of it. Because there was one point when Ted Turner purchased WCW or NWA and made it WCW, I almost fell off the industry until Paul Heyman brought ECW to Philly.
Right.
So, and then I started learning the different aspects. Now, when they let the curtain up, I was like, I like this, and I am inspired by this. To take chances on on your dreams and everything, and just keep going and creating and loving what you're doing instead of living for what other people do.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
But what is the one lesson that you take with you, and who was the person that taught you that lesson?
So, I'll give you two lessons that kind of work together.
Sure.
One lesson, the first lesson would be something that was kind of drilled into me by Joey Matthews, who, Joey Mercury.
Absolutely.
Who was one of my trainers down in OVW, and was also drilled in by, guys like Al Snow and anyone else that had really been in the business. And that was to respect the business, respect the history, respect the people, who every aspect of it, the people who are, operating the cameras, the people who are holding the cables behind the cameras, respect every single aspect of this business. And that was just something that I think that has stuck with me, because I think that that's as simple of a lesson as that is. It is so important to have that respect. Now, that respect doesn't necessarily mean you need to kiss up to everybody, and you need to, you know what I mean? But it's to have just a respect for what it is you're doing. It's one of those things, when I used to get into the ring, I picked up on that a lot of people would do, that I would wipe my feet on the mat before I would get into the ring.
Which is a traditional thing.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that was just kind of told, like, you're doing that. It's out of respect. You're going into this ring. You're about to take somebody else's life in your hands.
Yeah.
They're going to take your life in their hands. And it really is just about having that respect. As a wrestler, I always learned to leave everything personal out of the ring. If I was in there with somebody that I absolutely despised, I was going to treat them the same way as I was with somebody that I loved.
Right.
Because you're in there, and there's this unspoken, rule there that, you're giving somebody an opportunity. I've always hated people who have taken advantage of someone else in the ring.
Yeah.
Because that person is giving you their body. There's nothing, nothing cool about hitting someone really hard when they're letting you.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But the other lesson that I learned that I've applied this go around, because in my career, you know, when I was younger, I was like a bit of a hothead with, I wanted everything now, you know, I needed all that. Right. And the other lesson that I learned from my dad was he used to always tell me, this is back when I was in school, this is back when I was working, when I was in wrestling, whatever it was. Right. He would always tell me, you got to learn to play the game. Mm-hmm. And it took me many years to understand that. I thought I understood it at a time, but it took me many years to really understand that. And that was something in this business that you just have to understand that this is, it all kind of, it flows in a certain direction. And if you're, you know, the opportunities can be there, but you have to know how to take advantage of those opportunities. So, I mean, and of course, you know, something that my parents always instilled in me too, was to respect people and show them a certain level of respect. And I think that, so putting those things together is something that I think at this stage in the game in wrestling, and anybody that I talk to who's trying to make it in wrestling, or just business in general. Right. But really,
it does really apply to a lot of other things too, but, you know, in particular. Yeah.
But really in the wrestling business, I try to just, you know, tell people to, you know, play the game. Yeah, you might think you're ready for something. There's a reason, there's a pecking order. Take your time, bide your time. You know, the cream rises to the top, you know. But, you know, there's also the other term, which is, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease, you know. So don't be afraid to kind of make a little noise and make yourself known. But make sure that you're respectful. Make sure that you respect everybody and what they've done to get to where they are, and respect their journey, respect their sacrifices, and also have respect for your own. You know, respect your own sacrifices.
And
don't belittle
what
you've done.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't belittle what you've done, and how hard you've worked in your life and in your story. You know what I mean? So, yes, I don't know if it's a good answer your question.
It's good enough for me. It's good enough for me. It should be definitely good enough for our listeners, especially the ones who are looking to seek that same journey or a journey of its like, you know. So, definitely, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Josh, it's been a pleasure. Definitely got to have you on again. And right now,
anytime, man.
I'm giving you the reign. You're on stage. Let people know where they can follow you.
You can follow me on Twitter at So Says Shernoff. Shernoff is SHERNOFF. You can follow me at Facebook. It's facebook.com/So Says Shernoff. The show is actually Twitter at Shernoff Show, because I already had the So Says Shernoff handle from myself. But so the show is Facebook and Twitter. It's both Shernoff Show. Mm-hmm. You can go to SoSaysShernoff.com, and that will have a link to the Pro Wrestling Tees page. It also has some other merchandise on there as well. And there will be a lot of videos as we do YouTube. I think the YouTube videos will end up being on there, like direct links. But please, you know, send me messages. I love to interact with people on social media, and also check out the APTER Chat, wherever you would download a podcast, you can find that. We have a weekly show there.
You never have enough. There's never enough wrestling podcasts. I can tell you that. So the more the merrier.
Yeah, no, I think we're nearing 12 million, I think, at this point.
Nice. And having one with one of the legendary, iconic figures in wrestling, you can't go wrong.
No, I'm very lucky. I've been very, very lucky.
So, Mr. Shernoff, thank you so much again. We're going to have you back on in the near future, and best of luck to you, and I'll be definitely checking out the show as well. So
thank you.
Keep up the great work, and definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this very special episode of Talk Time Live exclusive. On behalf of myself and Josh Shernoff, all I got to say is learn to let go, live life, and love all things anime, comics, movies, games, and wrestling. This is A.C.M.G. presents Talk Time Live. We are out of here. Take care. This episode of ACMG Presents Talk Time Live is brought to you in part by Viewfinder's Identity Search and Design. Your choice for web design, graphic design, and all multimedia development needs. Visit VFISAD.com and let us bring your vision to reality.